No one expected him to react like that. The moment the man stepped closer to the glass, the entire enclosure went silent. Not the crowd, not the keepers, the gorilla. He had been moving along the back wall, slow, heavy, rhythmic, the way he always did in the late afternoon, the way he had done every day for 3 years. Then he stopped, mid-step, mid-breath, his head turned, not toward the noise, not toward the food tray one of the keepers had just set down near the east gate, toward the man. 230 pounds of silverback, and every single pound of it locked onto one person. The other gorillas in the enclosure kept moving. A younger male rolled sideways near the waterfall. A female picked at the ground near the far tree line. None of them felt it, but he felt it. His eyes didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't scan. They just held. The man hadn't announced himself. He hadn't called out. He was standing at the outer railing like any other visitor, worn jacket, hands at his sides, saying nothing. But something had already changed. The gorilla took one step forward, then another. Near the keeper station, a radio crackled. One of the senior wildlife staff, a woman who had worked this sanctuary for 11 years, looked up from her clipboard. Her eyes went straight to the enclosure. She didn't say anything. She just watched. The other keeper beside her took a slow half-step toward the gate, not panicked, just ready. Because a moving silverback with fixed attention is not something you ignore. He crossed a third of the enclosure in under 20 seconds, not charging, not displaying. No chest beat, no ground slap, no open mouth warning. Just movement, deliberate, weighted, like something pulled by a thread too thin to see. The crowd near the railing started pulling back. A child was lifted off the ground by instinct before his mother had even processed why. The gorilla didn't stop. Then 10 feet from the glass he did. He just stopped, stood there, upright, almost, both arms loose at his sides, and the aggression that everyone had been bracing for didn't come. No charge, no threat, no warning display, just a stillness so complete it felt louder than any sound he could have made. His shoulders dropped, barely, maybe half an inch, but anyone watching closely saw it. The hard set of his frame softened, not fully, not dramatically, just enough. His breathing, which had quickened with the approach, began to slow again. His chest rose and fell with something that was no longer urgency. The danger didn't leave the air entirely, but it shifted into something else. Then came the sound. Low, deep, pressed out from somewhere in the chest. Not a roar, not a bark, not the sharp percussive warning that means back away. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. And it wasn't random. It was the kind of sound that carries weight, the kind that moves through glass and railing, and 11 yards of open space and lands somewhere specific. The senior keeper stopped walking. She pressed her radio but didn't speak into it. The man at the railing had not moved. His hands were still at his sides. His feet hadn't shifted. His body hadn't turned. But something in his face had changed. Not fear. Fear looks a certain way, and this wasn't it. His jaw wasn't tight. His eyes weren't wide. They were full of something else entirely. Something that looked from a distance like recognition, like a man who had just heard a name he hadn't heard spoken in years. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The gorilla, the man, separated by reinforced glass, and 3 years, and everything that had happened in between. Then, slowly, so slowly that half the crowd didn't register it at first, the gorilla raised one arm. Heavy, deliberate, it moved forward and stopped just short of the glass. Just short. Open hand. Not a fist, not a threat, just a hand, held out, hovering an inch from the surface. The crowd didn't breathe. The keepers didn't move. The man at the railing looked at that hand, and his eyes didn't leave it. He remembers him. It started with a cardboard box. That's all it was. A small, damp cardboard box left at the sanctuary gate before sunrise. No note, no name, just a box with something breathing inside it. The man who found it wasn't even supposed to be there that early. He almost walked past it. He didn't. Inside, curled against the bottom corner like something trying to disappear, was a gorilla infant, maybe 4 weeks old, maybe less. His eyes were open but unfocused. His arms moved slowly, searching for something that wasn't there. He weighed less than a bag of rice. The staff named him Kibo. Nobody expected him to last the week. The first night he wouldn't eat. Not the formula, not the bottle, not anything offered by the 2 experienced handlers who took shifts through the dark hours, patient and practiced, trying everything they knew. He just lay there, breathing shallow, eyes half closed. By morning the senior vet had already begun preparing the team for the likely outcome. Then the man came in for his shift. He didn't do anything special. He didn't use a different technique or a different formula. He sat down on the floor of the care room, held the bottle low and waited. Kibo turned his head, slowly, then a little more, then he fed. Nobody in the room said anything. They just watched it happen. It wasn't explained then. It wasn't fully explained later. But from that morning forward, something was decided. Not by the staff, not by protocol, but by Kibo himself. He chose the man. The weeks that followed built themselves quietly. Kibo followed him down the corridor on unsteady legs, arms out for balance, falling and getting up, falling and getting up. He slept against the man's side during the midday rest periods, not because he was placed there, but because he moved there on his own every single time. When other handlers approached, Kibo tolerated them. When the man approached, Kibo's whole body changed. The tension left, the small hands reached up, the eyes tracked him across the room the moment he entered. It was attachment in its most unfiltered form. No performance, no conditioning, just a young animal who had decided in the wordless way animals decide things, that this person was safe. The man felt it too. He didn't talk about it much. He wasn't the type, but the staff noticed how his shifts began to stretch longer than scheduled, how he'd stay through lunch without being asked, how he checked in on weekends when he wasn't rostered on. Kibo noticed too. Animals always do. By the third month, the wildlife ecologist on staff pulled the man aside. She didn't say it harshly. She said it the way people say difficult things when they mean them, quietly, directly, without softening it past recognition. This bond, she said, is going to make the transition harder. The man nodded. He already knew. The goal was always reintegration. That was the mission of this sanctuary, not to keep, but to prepare. To build an animal strong enough and socialized enough to live within a group, to function, to belong somewhere beyond a care room and a familiar smell. Kibo was progressing well, which meant the timeline was approaching. The man kept showing up. He kept the routine steady. He didn't pull away, because pulling away suddenly would have caused its own damage, and he knew that too. But there was a shift now, subtle, a few more boundaries in place, a few more interactions mediated through the larger group. Kibo was spending longer periods with the other juveniles, learning the language of his own kind, filing away information that mattered more than anything a human could teach him. He was becoming what he was supposed to become. And still, every time the man walked into view, Kibo stopped whatever he was doing. Every time. The morning of the full transition, there was no ceremony. That's not how sanctuaries work. Ceremony is for humans. Animals need consistency, calm, and the absence of emotional disruption. The man understood this. He stood at the edge of the outer corridor and watched Kibo move into the main enclosure for the first time, hesitant at the threshold, then through it, then absorbed into the new space like water finding its level. Kibo didn't look back. Not because he had forgotten, but because he was doing what animals do when they are finally truly safe. He was moving forward. The man stayed at the corridor a moment longer than necessary. Then he turned and walked back through the facility without stopping. That was the last time they were in the same space. That was 3 years ago. And after that they never saw each other again. The glass was still between them. Kibo's hand hadn't moved, still raised, still open, still hovering that inch from the surface, as if he was waiting for something to confirm what his eyes were already telling him. The man slowly lifted his own hand, pressed it flat against the glass, palm to palm, separated by 2 inches of reinforced material and 3 years of silence. The crowd behind him had stopped moving entirely. No one was checking a phone, no one was talking to the person next to them. A woman near the left railing had her hand over her mouth and didn't seem to know it. Kibo didn't flinch at the contact. He leaned forward slightly, just his upper body, just an inch, and his eyes dropped to the joined hands and then came back up, to the man's face. He held there, reading it the way gorillas read things, not in a glance but in a sustained searching study, taking in micro movements that most humans wouldn't notice they were making. Whatever he found there, it was enough. His posture changed completely. The last of the held tension, the cautious, watchful stillness that a silverback carries even in calm moments, left his frame. His shoulders came down. His weight shifted forward. The expression that wildlife staff sometimes describe as the face an animal makes when threat assessment ends and something older takes over, settled across his features. He knew, not suspected, not reacted to a familiar smell or a familiar sound. Knew. The man on the other side of the glass felt his jaw tighten. Not fear, not shock. Something that had no clean name. The specific feeling of being recognized by something that had no reason to still remember you. Something that had moved on, grown, changed, become entirely itself, and still knew your hand against a pane of glass. Kibo pulled his palm back from the glass slowly, dropped it to his side, and then he moved. Not the deliberate weighted approach from before. This was different. This was a large animal making a decision with his whole body, shifting his weight, adjusting his angle, coming around to the access point at the side of the enclosure where the keeper gate sat. The senior keeper took one sharp step forward. The man at the railing turned toward her. She looked at him for a moment, then at Kibo, then back at the man. Something passed between the three of them that wasn't a conversation. She reached for her key. This is not standard procedure. No wildlife sanctuary opens an enclosure gate because an animal has shown recognition behavior. The protocols exist precisely because emotion, human emotion, has a long history of overriding judgment in these moments, and people have been hurt. She knew all of this. She opened the gate anyway, because she had worked with Kibo for 3 years, because she had never seen him move like this, because there are moments in this work when the protocol and the reality in front of you are looking at the same thing and arriving at different answers, and you have to choose which one you trust. She trusted what she was seeing. The man stepped through. He didn't move toward Kibo. He stood just inside the gate and let the space do its work. Let Kibo cover the remaining distance on his own terms, at his own pace, with full agency over what happened next. Kibo crossed the space in 4 strides. He didn't stop short this time. He came all the way in. Both arms came up and around the man's torso, not grabbing, not rough, not the dominant physical assertion of a silverback establishing hierarchy. Something slower than that, something that took its time finding its shape. He held on. The man's arms came up too, one hand on Kibo's back, the other at his shoulder. They stayed like that. The crowd was completely silent, not the performed hush of people trying to be respectful, the involuntary silence of people who have stopped functioning normally because something in front of them has bypassed every filter and landed directly. A keeper near the back of the observation area turned away, not from discomfort. She just needed a moment. Kibo didn't let go. Not after 10 seconds, not after 20. His breathing was slow and even against the man's shoulder, and his grip, though controlled, didn't loosen. This was not excitement, not play, not the physical exuberance of a young animal greeting a familiar person. This was something a 3-year-old silverback had been carrying without a language for it, a weight that had no outlet until this exact moment, and he was not in any hurry to put it down. The man closed his eyes, just for a moment, just long enough. Years passed, but he never forgot. Eventually, Kibo loosened his grip, not all at once. It happened in stages, the way deep things release, slowly, without announcement. First the pressure across the man's back eased, then one arm dropped, then the other. He stepped back, not far, maybe 2 feet. And he stood there looking at the man the way he had looked at him through the glass, that same sustained, unhurried study, as if he was storing something, filing it away in whatever part of him had held the last 3 years without losing a single detail. The man didn't move immediately. He stood in the same spot, hands at his sides again, and let Kibo look. He owed him that much. Around them, the enclosure was quiet. The other gorillas had drifted to the periphery at some point during all of this, not alarmed, not agitated, just giving the center of the space to whatever was happening there. They moved slowly along the tree line, unbothered, present, life continuing around something that had briefly stopped it. One of the younger keepers crouched near the gate with both hands pressed together against her mouth. The senior keeper stood straight, clipboard at her side, watching with the particular expression of someone who has spent a career preparing for the emotional weight of this work and has just discovered the preparation had a ceiling. Nobody spoke, nobody needed to. The man took one step back toward the gate. Kibo watched him. Another step. Kibo didn't follow. He understood gates. He understood the shape of a goodbye. Had learned it once already, 3 years ago in a corridor that smelled like antiseptic and morning feed. He didn't move toward the man and he didn't look away. He just watched. The man reached the gate and stopped there for a moment with his hand on the frame. He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say that the last 20 minutes hadn't already covered. Nothing a word could add to what a held hand against glass and 2 arms around a torso had already finished saying completely. He looked at Kibo one more time. Kibo looked back. Then the man stepped through the gate. The keeper closed it behind him without a sound. On the other side of the enclosure, the younger male who had been rolling near the waterfall earlier had drifted back toward the center. He made a low sound, casual, social, the ordinary noise of a group animal checking in with the space around him. Kibo turned toward it. Slowly he moved back into the enclosure, back toward the group, back toward the life he had built inside this place, the hierarchy, the rhythms, the known textures of his days. By the time the man had walked the length of the outer corridor, Kibo was already near the tree line, moving the way he always moved in the late afternoon, slow, heavy, rhythmic, like he always did. The man didn't look back through the glass as he passed it. He didn't need to. Some things don't require a final look because they were never really about the looking. They were about the knowing, the quiet, unshakable fact of having been known by something that had no obligation to remember you and remembered you anyway. He pulled his jacket straight and kept walking. Behind him, near the far tree line, a silverback moved through the long afternoon light, unhurried, whole, carrying something that time had not touched. Time changed everything, but not what he remembered.